and we are hosting today's Tech-NEW-logy program, which is the last this year in the series. Tech-NEW-logy is run by Phil Strasser, and I'm going to pass over to him in a minute. Just a brief housekeeping note. So in the chat, please put your questions in the chat, and Christi will be keeping an eye on that and picking up any questions as she goes. And on that note, Phil, I'd like to pass it on to you to start.
Sure. Welcome, everyone. This is the last program, but last but not least, this is going to be fantastic, really. Lots of new stuff on AgilLink and Bridge. This is really going to be amazing. So let me introduce the moderator, who is a fantastic person. Christi is the founder and CEO of White River Consultants, an integrated family office that helps families of wealth turn financial complexity into quality and calm. Serving as the integrator, she designs and installs the operating systems, workflows, reporting rhythms, document architecture, and cross-advisor coordination that keeps the information organized and decisions moving. White River also consults on the technology that underpins those systems, advising on software selection, implementation, ongoing services, so the families and the advisors work from a single source of truth. In addition, Christi consults with RIAs to build their own systems and playbooks that scale delivery without chaos. With 2 decades serving high-performing families, she has seen how siloed advisors and fragmented records waste time, money, and trust, and she solves it with structure. That's a mouthful. I could have used the shorter version, but Christi deserves all of those accolades, and her office is just a one-of-a-kind office. So, Christi, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Phil. That was very kind of you. All right. So we have a pretty big agenda today because both AgilLink and Bridge are pretty unique. And AgilLink has been around for a little while, but they have some pretty cool updates. And Bridge is newer to the scene and is doing things a little different. So I am super excited to dive right in. Will you please do just a very quick introduction of yourselves, who you are, how long you've been with the firm, and just a short sentence if you'd like to add it.
And I'm Asher Adler. I am the head of product here at AgilLink. I've been with the firm for the last 15 years. I really enjoy seeing client problems, what they're struggling with in their workflows and their operations, coming in, being able to build solutions to help them streamline, to help them be more efficient and more effective in the work that they do.
Fantastic.
Great.
Alex?
I'm Alex Goodwin, co-founder and CEO of Bridge. We're a bit younger to the scene here, as Christi mentioned. So I co-founded the business in 2024 with my partner, Io Ekator, both of us coming from a private equity investing background prior to meeting at Harvard Business School. So we're about a year in market now with our product, and we are building an operating system dedicated to private markets.
Awesome. And Asher, how long I feel like AgilLink's been around for a very long time. So how long has it been around sort of in general, and then this current version of AgilLink that we're going to be talking about today? How long has this version been in the marketplace?
I'm happy to take the question. Yeah. So
thank you.
DataFaction has been around for 50 years, since 1976, which is quite unique when you look at technology companies and their longevity. So we're very proud of that. And that was our former company name. For some of you may have heard of DataFaction in the marketplace. Over the last 10 to 15 years, we've really pivoted from a server-based implementation in clients' offices to a cloud-based solution. And the cloud-based solution that we're talking about today is what we've rebranded as AgilLink. So AgilLink is the next iteration of DataFaction, cloud-based solution, software as a service that is running over the web. And that's been in production in earnest for about the last 8-9 years.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So, we can ask lots of questions on team structure and all of that kind of stuff. But what I really want to get into a little bit quicker is, and Alex, I'm going to kick this question off with you. Because of what Bridge is doing, what is the gap that you saw in the space that led you to create Bridge? So what's the gap? And then how does Bridge fill that gap as a solution?
Yeah, sure. So I think if you rewind back to when we got going, so this was early 2024 when we were starting to get excited about building at the cross section of technology and private markets. And I think at the time, what Io and I had both been hearing and seeing from our careers thus far in private equity investing was a lot of talk about democratization, a lot of talk about access into product. How do we get more high net worth investors into, private equity, private credit, venture? And I think what was not being discussed as much was the required digital infrastructure to power such a transition, right? So we're all aware of the trends around wealth transfer and just alternative investments growing and booming relative to public markets investing, fewer companies going public, right? So all of the macro tailwinds are well demonstrated and have been for several years now. But I think folks were spending a lot of time thinking about how do we get people into these products and maybe underestimating the difficulty of actually managing private investments, right? And it's a very different workflow than public investments. So we sort of knew that that was going to be a challenge and that it was going to be a compounding challenge that would scale commensurately with the increase in demand that we were seeing for alts as a category. The opportunity specifically in the gap that we saw on the infrastructure side was the fact that I think a lot of folks were building on either older technology or taking a human first approach to solving pain points in this space. And I think for us, midway through HBS, OpenAI came out with GPT and everybody was really thinking a lot about how that was going to change industry sort of across the board. And I think for us, we thought, okay, well, this is a data problem at its core in terms of what makes private markets hard. It's the idiosyncratic kind of non-standardized structure of the data that gets spat out of these investments that really makes it challenging to wrangle. And so we sort of said, okay, it's the perfect storm. And those are the pieces of the puzzle that we need to put together to build something that can be a technology-first solution, a more scalable solution to the pain points that everybody is experiencing and continue to experience as they grow their exposure to alts.
Very cool. You and I have had coffee and had a couple of conversations. I love the technology first human overlay approach that y'all have taken to that space. I think it's actually quite unique. And maybe also solves some of the issues of data feeds not being quite what we need on the other side for those of us who are working with all of those.
Yeah, and that's an important point, right? It is a human overlay on top of a technology-centric solution. We don't think that AI is quite ready to be a headless, autonomous solution to any of these problems yet, right? So it's not a set it and forget it. There is definitely a human touch component to quality assurance and to customer service and things of that nature, right? But at the end of the day, it's just a fundamentally different approach to how to do the hardcore work, which is around collecting, extracting, structuring, analyzing, and understanding the underlying investment data that's getting spat out of these private holdings.
Yeah, and take a slightly different twist on that because AgilLink has been around for many, many years. What is the I guess the changes and the progress that AgilLink is implementing, the updating of the platform that you feel like is really pushing forward this solution, this area in the market that y'all are playing in?
Yep. So what I covered initially was a big shift, the move to software as a service and putting software up in the cloud. And where we really saw the benefit of that, although it's not a new concept, was during COVID, where people on a dime had to go out and rethink how they work and where they work and having access to their most critical infrastructure. At our core, we are a general ledger bill pay accounting platform, and our clients are doing a high volume of very sensitive bill pay transactions for some of the wealthiest individuals in this country and around the world. How do you keep that secure and moving forward in an environment like in a COVID world? And that's one big shift that really helped our clients through the transition of COVID. But obviously, like Alex was discussing, technology has moved forward. AI is, I mean, if you don't hear it 50 times a day, then you're sleeping through half your day, right? That's all we hear about is AI, AI, AI. And one of the very laborious tasks our clients go through is entering bills into an accounting system. Well, how do we leverage AI and start automating some of that process without compromising on the core controls and the fundamental security that's built into the bill pay process? So I think AI is definitely we are looking at it and starting to figure out how to incorporate that into high volume, low value tasks without any compromise on the security. And I think that's a key point as I think about AI is great and it does some amazing things, but for the markets that we serve, whether it's, our history has been in business management, entertainment, moving into family wealth and family office, at the core of everything they do is internal control and security. And once that is compromised, your whole system is called into question. So we need to do it in a very thoughtful way that maintains our control and security while delivering the value of automation and being forward thinking in terms of technology.
So I'm going to pull on a thread because certainly I remember from way back. So I'd love for you to, and there might be others here who remember the AgilLink of past days. You are a GL system. You have a bill pay integration. On the bill pay side, is that running through, I think, City National? Is that right?
Yeah.
So if you're using the system to pay bills, you're using a City National account. Is that correct?
At a high level, that's correct. And to explain a little bit of that integration. So we were acquired by City National Bank in 2010. So we were independently owned from 76 to 2010. 2010, City National acquired DataFaction. In 2015, City National was acquired by the Royal Bank of Canada. So we've had a few acquisitions over the years. But in terms of the core integration for bill pay and a banking platform within your general ledger, that is run through City National Bank.
Okay.
Part of the reason behind that is it takes two to tango. So there are a lot of financial institutions out there that have really neat technologies. The level of integration that we've built together with City National Bank prior to our acquisition is actually something that the City National Bank had to come to bat with. They had to invest in that and want to create a level of integration where clients do not even need to log into an online banking platform anymore to manage their clients' cash, their bill pay, any of their financial lives, because it's all managed and centralized within the software. With that being said, this past year, we actually released a major upgrade to our software where we are able to pull in information from 10,000 plus financial institutions. So even if you're not if you're not banking with City National Bank, you can still see balances, do reconciliation, have transactions come in to the accounting system. That's a big pain point for clients, is manual entry of transactions after the fact into their general ledger. So we've streamlined that with our Connect to Bank integration, which brings in financial data from 10,000 plus institutions. You do not need to use City National per se to use our bill pay platform. You could still, our system prints checks. It's 2020, almost 2026. People are still printing checks. You could definitely do that and take advantage of the entire workflow around that check printing process. But in order to take advantage of the full operational efficiency and the digitization of the payment flow process, that is a function that is integrated solely with City National Bank.
Okay. Thank you very much for clearing that up for me. Sure. So, Alex, I want to talk about something I thought was so interesting whenever we were chatting is how Bridge is onboarding, well, in our perspective, from my perspective, onboarding a family, but it's really onboarding a family or an entity's private investments, logins, all of those alternatives that sometimes have a platform that they live on, and sometimes they just live in email. So talk to us a little bit about what does Bridge's onboarding look like, time frame, training, that kind of thing.
Yeah. absolutely. So this is something we spent a lot of time on at the outset when we got going. And part of the reason for that was because while we went and did our market work and found that a good chunk of the industry still operates this manually, right? A lot of folks that just are manually logging into places, tracking inboxes, collecting information, categorizing it, and pulling the right data out of it to enter it manually, much like Asher mentioned, into other systems. There are other providers out there, of course, and we wanted to understand, well, what are some of the limitations that exist today to a kind of human-based approach to these challenges? And I think one of the main ones was actually implementation. It's getting up and running, right? And you can't really overstate how hard that can be with some of these systems, right? It's a big implementation. And so we started there from a design process, as opposed to just focusing on the product once you're onboarded. We said, how can we make the implementation of this product a lot easier and smoother for our user, right? To sort of lower the barrier to adoption. And I think for us, what we focused on there was, how can we insert ourselves into the existing infrastructure and workflow of our user in a creative and secure way? That was the fundamental principle on which we built the product and the onboarding product in particular. And so what we did there, as opposed to taking, I think, what the status quo approach has been, which has been to basically do a lot of paperwork to get authorizations and third-party accesses set up and things of that nature, we built what we refer to as a proxy agent, right? And this is where I think some of the modern technology has really come a long way. And it was some combination of the new technology and our head of engineering, who joined us from Plaid, where he had quite a bit of experience with creating, complex encrypted integration capability. We sort of put those two things together and built a pretty neat system. We have a provisional patent file on it. Actually, we're pretty proud of it, and something we spent a lot of time building. And it allows our system to act effectively as a member of the team, right? So we think of it and we communicate it as such, as if you hired an analyst or an associate or an assistant and said, hey, look, here's all the places where you need to go and pull information every day and find whatever's new and go and download it. And then you're going to categorize it like this and pull out these 7 data points from a capital call and these 9 data points from an account statement and put them here and here, and then, make it show up in Addepart or wherever else it needs to go, right? And so that's really the whole way that we conceived of the onboarding and implementation of Bridge, which I think is a fundamentally different approach to anybody else in our space, right? And so not to necessarily say that one's better or worse, but certainly different. And that's how we approach it. And so as it relates to timing, I think that solved the big pain point, right? Because I think time to value is a really important component of any software decision. And I think, of course, a J curve is understandable. At the beginning of any new implementation, there's going to be a little bit of a dip before you start getting the efficiency gains. But the hope is that it's not, 6, 9, 12 months before you start seeing some positive ROI there. And I think for us, that onboarding time is a function of scale ultimately, right? Because it does come back to how many holdings, how many unique locations across inboxes and websites do you have information to track? But, for let's say a single family office example where somebody comes to us with 100, 200 investments, that's usually a week or two, right? And I think historically we've heard that would be more like a couple months, maybe measured in quarters even, right? And so I think that's somewhere that we've spent a lot of time and investment and differentiated a bit in the market.
Yeah. I think the other place that you've absolutely differentiated is the fact that you guys have figured out that 2-factor authentication. That we spend a lot of time internally on 2-factor work. And so the fact that you guys figured out how to make that happen without having to constantly go back to the family or the family office to be able to get codes and information is absolutely incredible and quite frankly a game changer.
Yeah, that's all part of that process up front and a very hard build, right? I mean, so we did put a lot of thought into how we can, again, really that core principle. How can we leverage the existing workflow, but in a way that creates automation and removes the manual clicks and the manual conversations, facilitating that process, right? And I do think that when we meet folks, it also ends up being a pretty good forcing function to help them get their own house in order, even prior to onboarding with Bridge, right? In the pre-onboarding, there's a lot of that, that's the thing that can take more time, honestly, than onboarding itself sometimes. It's like, hey, we meet you where you are. And it's, hey, do you even know all the places where you log in? Do you know all your own credentials, right? Do you know if you get a code from an email or an authenticator app, right? So there's a lot of that sort of discovery work in the pre-onboarding where it's sort of like, all right, this is probably a time for us to get a little bit buttoned up here and get our own house in order so that we can then allow Bridge to fully automate this for us.
Okay. So Asher, on we all know that a GL system can go quickly, or it can have quite a lengthy onboarding, and a lot of that is due to starting fresh or importing and all of those things. But how so implementation is a lot driven from the third party, from the family or the service provider who's using the system. Generally speaking, what do you see as some of the biggest hurdles for a new client when they're adopting AgilLink and you're getting that started? And then how can AgilLink kind of help bridge that gap or support that process to get them moving forward faster?
So I would say that implementation onboarding is actually a major strength that we have. As we've moved from our legacy platform to our SaaS platform, that was a migration and implementation of our 200 plus clients, some of who have been with us for 30 plus years. So we've gone through this with our existing client base, not just new clients, hundreds of times, and we've kind of gotten to a point where we have a system that is really effective for onboarding. I think some of the challenges, the biggest challenge has changed. That's the biggest challenge by far. Clients are, or prospective clients, it's hard for them to change. They're used to doing things a certain way, getting used to the concept of digital approvals when you're used to passing a piece of paper around, which people are still doing today. It takes time to get people comfortable with that. Deciding on how to structure a chart of accounts within a general ledger. There might be a lot of back and forth and trying to, one person, a tax person might look at it this way, whereas a person just running the operation and doing the bill pay may look at it another way. Sorry?
Very different. We look at things very differently.
Very differently, exactly. So you have some of that. I think when a office is not well organized, like Alex was saying, this is a time for them to get their house in order. So a lot of times you actually see what's not in order as you go into an implementation. But we put around our implementations, we put a team of a customer success team. And that customer success team will lead a client through chart design. They'll lead a client through workflow implementation. They'll lead a client through the user roles. How should we set people up and think about their levels of access? How do other firms do it? And that's one of the advantages that we bring to the table is we're not doing this from the perspective of one or two family offices or one or two clients. We're doing this just from the perspective of 400 plus implementations that we've done, and we have experience around that. So we've seen a lot of the pitfalls. We've also seen what has succeeded with our customers, and time to going live it depends on every implementation, but we could get clients up and live on a full GL implementation in about a month.
Okay. That's actually pretty good for a GL system.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Alex, we had a question come up, and this one is directly for you. So Jesse is asking, how do you achieve the bypassing of the end user for the client portal MFAs without sacrificing the integrity in the cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the short answer is that we've had to do a lot of work on very advanced encryption. Right. So there's a lot of complicated built-in security that is not so different from the way that other systems that store tokenized values associated with other underlying credentials or, strings of text or quantitative values, do things, right? So systems like Plaid and others, it's not exactly the way Plaid works, but there's a lot of similarity there, right? And again, our head of engineering who leads our technology organization, architected that from scratch. And it took 6 months. I mean, literally when we started in mid 2024, that was all we did until the end of the year, was just building this process of how do you onboard and make this whole flow automated, but also hyper secure. What I could say anecdotally and on a demo, I think it was Jesse, would be happy to go into the detail there, of course, on a separate call. But, in short, this is a SOC 2 Type 2 compliant service that we built that's been audited, to the gills. We've gone through many an InfoSec vendor approval process with several large firms, we're serving firms today that manage a couple $100 billion in assets across them. And so we've been put through the ringer on security, and it's the right thing to do, right? Because anytime you are using more advanced technology, that is the question. All right, well, that all seems great and well, but is it safe? Is it secure? How does it work? And so we really had to spend a lot of time and a lot of bandwidth, and we still do today, on a continuous effort to make sure that that's secure.
Awesome. Thank you. Jesse, I hope that helps. Asher, I'm going to go back over to you because we've had another question come in from Phil on the difference between the AgilLink bill pay or treasury management. How is that different from Bill?
Yeah, so Bill.com is primarily a bill pay platform, which is really focused on the AP side of things. As I mentioned earlier, AgilLink is a full general ledger. So you have your financial reporting, you have your tax reporting, you have your bill pay, you have your workflow built in, also a document management system that's not limited to the accounts payable side of things, but really a full document management system that can be used. Clients store contracts, they store important information for their clients, licenses and passports, etc. So I would say that we are a comprehensive general ledger, whereas Bill.com is focused on the bill pay side specifically. Another area of differentiation is the operating model. So Bill.com, when you make payments, will actually debit money out of the account and then send a payment off on your behalf. So you may have reconciliation challenges with that. If they're pulling out $10,000, but it's for 10 different payments, each of them being $1,000, you may not be able to match a $10,000 debit on your bank account to $10,000 of individual $1,000 payments. Our operating model with City National Bank is we're operating directly off the bank account. So we're not pulling money, holding onto it, and then making a payment out of a trust account that we have. It's coming directly off the client's bank account. So from a reconciliation standpoint, you can look at a bank statement, you can look at your general ledger in AgilLink, and every transaction that goes out matches as a one-to-one transaction.
Okay, so we utilize Bill for a lot of our families. It does match off on a one-to-one, but I certainly agree. Bill is a bill payment platform, our AP, where AgilLink you've really built the GL. And that's a function inside of the GL. So I can absolutely see how that would be very helpful rather than having to connect Bill to something else, having that all in one platform. Awesome. Thank you for that question, Phil. Okay, so I have a few more and then we will open this up to questions. Because we are moving in such a fast-paced world from a technology perspective, from AI technology, what a family needs. I don't know about you guys, but we are constantly receiving feedback on what is important for a family to have access to, what maybe has fallen to the wayside a little bit simply because there's other things that have taken their place. So Alex, I'm going to come back to you. What does the Bridge roadmap look like for the next 6 to 12 months? And are there any like big stretch goals that the firm is going for to really push your technology forward?
Yeah, great question. So we think about the roadmap in a few phases, and I think it's important to say this. The phases for us on our roadmap are sequential in nature. And what I mean by that is product number 2 is sequentially dependent on product number 1, right? And we're very intentionally building that way, not only because I think it is the logical way to add value for our customer, but it also creates a good moat for us, right, as we build our business. And so phase number 1 has been all about the mission critical workflows, mostly back office facing, as it relates to managing alternative investment exposure, right? So you can't miss capital calls. You have to get K1s to the right CPAs, right? These are just the critical workflows that have to get done to operate an alt portfolio. And that's where we focused in year 1. And I think that's where we've made some good strides and found some quick adoption. As we look towards this coming year, and we think about that next second phase of the roadmap that we've been starting to build, it really becomes about how we can leverage that data set to the benefit of our user in other parts of their organization, right? So can we now move more towards the front office side of the house and provide some level of insight and analytics capabilities into that data set that otherwise would just be far too cumbersome to do manually, right? So this would be things like understanding portfolio construction and exposure underneath funds, right? This is something that we care deeply about, given that's the world we came from, right? We were generating those reports portfolio company by company that rolled up to the overall fund performance that got sent out to our LPs. Can we help kind of reverse engineer that now that we have the LP facing side of that document and knowing what's underneath it, create a view that actually helps folks really more intrinsically understand performance the way that they can sort of map that across public and private exposure. We're building a system that will allow for interactive interfacing with the data contained within the four walls of the user's environment. So the ability to query a documented data set and, get answers to things in minutes that otherwise would have taken weeks and weeks of analyst time to pour through the documents and try to see, okay, who are all the managers that are talking about sanctions or tariff exposures on these countries? How is that impacting us, right? Just being able to quickly get and distill down into answers to questions like that using our system, right? So that's really the second phase of our roadmap, is all around that analytical business intelligence suite of products. And I think that ambitious stretch goal, number 3 that you mentioned, we want to go end to end here, right? So everything that we just talked about is on the post-trade side of the business. I think that the more ambitious goal would be, can we create continuity across pre-trade and post-trade? Still kind of with data and analytics at its core, right? So this isn't, we're not trying to go out and be a feeder fund builder and, be an iCapital competitor or anything like that. It's more around, can we now leverage the existing data set and analytics on that data to empower people to make better decisions on the pre-trade side, right? Okay, now I'm looking at new investments for the family. How much do we want to allocate to this, that, and the other this year? Well, you really want to do that in the context of greatly understanding what today looks like. And we think that there's going to be an exciting opportunity to build tools that help power that pre-trade side of the business in the context of now having all of that post-trade housed in one single system, right? And so that's kind of the ambitious roadmap goal that we're going after. And I'm hoping that by the end of this coming year, we're starting to scratch the surface on that third part, but certainly phase number 2 is the core focus for 2026.
Okay. So Asher, I have the same question for you. What does the roadmap for AgilLink look like over the next 6 to 12 months? And is there a stretch goal that the company's going after?
Yes, I think I'll start with our roadmap and stretch goal. I think are intertwined, and it's really getting AI into the application in as many places as we can. We are part of a bank, and being part of a bank there's a tremendous advantage in terms of information security and controls that are just built into being owned by a bank. So as we build AI in, we're building it in a way that is secure and compliant to bank level standards, which generally translates to secure and compliant to our client standards. So really building AI into the data entry process, especially around accounts payable, like I mentioned earlier, to lower cost and bring people's operations to a more efficient place. That's what we've been hearing from our clients. That's what they want, and that's what we're looking to build in at scale. One thing that I just wanted to mention is, being a general ledger platform, we're a multi-entity general ledger platform. So our clients are not running 5-10 entities. In many instances, we have clients running 50 up to 500 entities on the platform. So being able to scale out that AI capability on 50, 100, 200 entities is a massive, massive value to our clients. One of the other big goals we have for this year is modernizing our platform. So we are a web-based application, but technology moves so fast. We are rebuilding some of our core technology in terms of the user interface and the user experience to make it more responsive, to make it easier to use and more intuitive, so that our customers just have an overall ease of use experience with the platform. So our modernization effort is a massive effort over the next year and a year plus, but we will be releasing pieces of our new platform into 2026. I think one other area to mention is our ecosystem integration. So we have a very purpose-built API that integrates with different partners. So one partner does investment data aggregation, turning investment data into a dual-sided journal entry for your books so that your balance sheet is investment aware, as opposed to somebody having to key that in off of a brokerage statement, which is confusing and time consuming. So it's really looking at the ecosystem partners out there and how do we deepen integrations with platforms that our clients are using for their day-to-day operations. So there's more connectivity and less manual entry when it comes to interchange of data.
Interesting. If I could add to your roadmap, since you also have the documentation system built into the platform, you could have an AI overlay to be able to query questions based on those documents. That would just be pretty darn fun.
Definitely something we've been talking about. There's a lot of fun things to do. That's for sure.
Yes, there are. So Alex, we had a question come in for you from Niles, and I apologize if I'm not saying your name correctly. Saw that you work with aggregators like Dynasty. What does the sales and integration / onboarding process look like for those organizations who are simultaneously centralized and decentralized?
Yeah, good question. So the way that we typically see folks like that, and by the way, Dynasty is not actually an active customer of ours today, so I'm not sure where that information came from, but we do work with several of their peers and folks that look like them. So notwithstanding, I can still answer that question. The way that those firms are typically structured, we find, is they will try to have a sort of a centralized ops function that will sit across the platform, right? Because a lot of their value add is to try to outsource and centralize some of that type of work so that it gets taken off of the individual advisor's plate, right? Thus freeing them up in theory to leverage platform level resources, but focus more on building their business, prospecting, advising, etc. And so for those types of firms, we often see a central ops layer that will sit across the, decentralized firm, as it were, and they will have purview into all of this type of stuff, right? So access to the data and the documents, such that they can sort of serve as a back office function for those firms, those partner firms. And so typically that's actually where our onboarding work and sort of super user core will sit, right? So we'll see a group that sits in that central ops seat, and they will be the super admins on the Bridge platform. And then we have quite a bit of complex permissioning and collaboration functionality that enables them to delegate out certain levels of access and visibility into that overarching data set, right? So that could be at the firm level. Some folks like to organize it by office. Sometimes there are subgroups within those even. And then some folks can be view only. Some can be view and edit. Some can be, full override and actually be able to change data, right? So there's all various levels of who can do what. And that also extends to external collaborators. Right. So to the extent that there are external CPAs, other folks that the firm works with, and they want to continue to automate away some of the manual back and forth to do this workflow, they can also issue and do that through our settings and permissions function. So that's typically how it works with firms like that. And again, so if you are a firm like that, it really, best practice that we've seen is there's kind of usually that central ops layer that really has kind of oversight across the board, and that helps make it a lot more efficient.
Cool. Niles, I hope that answered your question. To pull on that thread, just as a quick check our box here, Bridge is able to integrate with most APIs with other systems, Adapar, other GLs. Is that a fair statement?
So we are able to do it with virtually anybody that's, collaborative and open architecture and willing to work with us, usually at the request of a mutual client, right? That's kind of how all of our integrations have come to be so far. But yes, today that already is up and running for a lot of the major names that you would expect, right? Folks like Adapar, folks like Orion. And that's really where we started, because ultimately, while folks spend a lot of time in Bridge really digging in on the data and the information, they also like to be able to know that they have that overarching snapshot in one single column over in Adapar, right? Such that they kind of have that holistic picture. They know what to report against. If it's in the advisory space, they know what to bill against, right? And kind of have a market adjusted real-time view into that data, which is really important, right? Because from an integration standpoint, sometimes it's not enough just to have those headline numbers flow across, right? Take a capital call, for example. Well, there's a net money movement, but sort of very analogous to Asher's example of, well, that 10,000 transaction might be comprised of many sub-transactions. That's the level of data detail you need to capture to effectively report on this information and then transmit that data to the other places where it needs to live. So we spend a lot of time on our data model and the interoperability component of our system. Some folks that use us today also will just directly call on our API endpoints to pull data sets. So every single day at the same time, they'll hit our endpoints, pull detailed cash flows, for example, and then use that how they want to and need to right on there. And so there's a lot of different ways to interact with our data, but integrations are a critical and central component of the product.
Cool. Asher, same question. AgilLink able to have an open API to be able to push pull data into other systems. Though, in case everybody doesn't already know, a GL system is very different from an investment platform portfolio reporting system. Nonetheless, there are still certainly areas that it's nice to be able to pull and push information. AgilLink open API system?
Yeah, we definitely have an API that our customers use. And very much like Alex said, APIs and integrations are really developed at the mutual request of a client and a partner. And that's usually where we find the most success. People have ideas of how they want to utilize APIs sometimes, but don't necessarily have the right partner or the technology wherewithal to do it. What we find the most success in is when we have the client with the technology background as well as the right partner. What I'm seeing more and more of is clients coming directly to us and saying, hey, we want to access our data via your API directly because we're pulling data out and we're putting it into some data hub where we're aggregating other data together with it. But as I mentioned, with our investment API, our investment integration that's actually built into the platform, we do integrate with some investment systems as well that allow us to push and pull data from investment into investment systems and out of investment systems for reporting purposes.
Okay. From a usability perspective, so whenever we are talking about software with groups, with a family or with an RA, because they're trying to figure out the solution that's going to work best for them, one of the things that we always ask is, do you want to need to have somebody who runs this system, or do you want to be able to run this system internally? Like, do we need an astronaut to run it, or can we run it? And so Asher, how does that work? Obviously you need people who understand accounting to be able to run that system. But generally speaking, from a usability standpoint, do your clients find it relatively easy to navigate? I know you mentioned upgrades on the kind of the UI experience moving forward, but generally speaking, do you find that it's fairly friendly to move through?
Absolutely, yeah. You don't need an astronaut, although that would be a neat role for like a system administrator. But we do not need that level. Yeah. Well, when you made that comment, it made me think of like a Salesforce implementation where you really need somebody there who's like knows the ones and zeros of that entire system to make it to stand it up potentially. Our system is really user-friendly. Even the administration of the system, we try to make things as simple as possible. So delegation of roles and rights and access rights and setting up new entities and creating groups of entities, all the things that go into a setup of a general ledger accounting system, we really enable the family office or the firm to do it themselves. And we have a robust training library of videos, documentation, where if somebody just needs a quick refresher, they could go and check on it. They could call their client services team that's available. They could call their client success manager. So we have a good support team around the client at all times. It's not just during implementation, but it's post-implementation. As they're live, we have clients that have access to resources to help them. But it is a user-friendly system. You don't need to hire a dedicated, kind of guru. Although the nature of systems is people become experts in them over time. They become the guru internally, but you don't need to bring that person in day one to start.
Yeah. And there's just the only thing I would quickly add, and not to, I think Asher said a lot of great points that I resonate with, but I think for us, typically what we find is that there's already at least one person doing everything that we do, but by hand, right? And so all we're really trying to do is act as a force multiplier for that internal team that's already kind of drowning in this work, right? So that they can spend time on higher value add activities. And so usually it's a fairly easy system for folks to learn because they end up getting in there and saying, oh, this is just doing the things that I would have been doing by my own two hands, and making it happen a lot more quickly without me having to spend time on doing those functions. So there's kind of a built-in intuitive component to how our system works because we mirror human behavior to build it.
Awesome. So neither of you need astronauts to run. That's amazing. Or to implement necessarily. So let's talk about how do you price around, how do you price your systems? How do you talk a family or a client through that?
I'll start. I think we try and keep our pricing pretty simple with a base fee and a per user fee. And the reason we structure it that way is our clients are scaling the number of entities on our platform very quickly. So if we were charging on a per entity basis or a transaction basis, that gets very expensive very, very quickly. We have clients who are doing thousands and thousands of bill pay transactions per month, and to charge for each one does not scale very well. So we start with a base fee. On top of that base fee is a per user fee beyond that. And it turns into a monthly software as a service, a SaaS licensing fee. We do not charge for customer service. We do not charge for the implementation that goes along with it. In terms of, we don't charge hourly on that, but we charge a base SaaS license fee plus additional users. It's predictable, it's scalable, and it really scales with your business. As you bring people on, as you need more people, your cost is going to increase by X for that. It's not, in the investment world, we see pricing based on AUM and things like that. None of that. It's really strictly a user-based pricing.
Yeah. Very cool. That's definitely different from a lot of the systems that are out there. So good to know. Alex, how about you? How are you thinking about pricing?
Yeah, would echo that last point as well, right? I think the AUM-based pricing model just doesn't make a lot of sense for some of these types of products, right? And so we similarly operate a SaaS model where the input to the pricing is the volume of investments. So it's, again, not going so granular as to say, each document or each transaction, right? That would get really way too expensive and also would be just very cumbersome to track. So instead, we try to align with what we think is the leading indicator for how much work we are displacing and hopefully time we're giving back to our user, which is, it's really how many investments are you tracking, right? That's what drives the whole level of workflow and pain that our users have that they're adopting Bridge to get rid of. And so it's tiered by volume. And that's another important piece to hit on, right? As the business scales, we're not having the cost scale linearly. So our users, as they're growing, and the folk that already have more scale, that unit price continues to blend down over time because we're sharing some of the efficiency gains that we have by using technology. As our marginal cost approaches zero, the deeper we get with a user. And I think that is a big difference versus, again, systems that are maybe a little bit more human-based where cost kind of scales more linearly. So price sort of has to maintain a bit more of a fixed nature. So we're trying to share some of that efficiency gain with our user in the form of price depression over time at the unit level. We don't charge for implementation. That's built in, again, because we implement a little bit differently. And then the other thing we don't charge for, and this is really important, is historical data. Right. And so just to hit on that for a second, when we onboard with somebody, it's not just from today going forward that now we're going to be taking in those documents and delivering that data. Very first step of the onboarding process is actually a historical backfill of any documents and data that our system finds in the onboarding. Right. So that is not something that we charge extra for, but I know that it's something that a lot of other folks would charge quite a bit for because it would be a lot of manual work to do it. So it's one simple price per line, inclusive of onboarding, inclusive of historical data.
Yeah, that's the difference when the technology comes first. The technology does that heavy lifting, and then you just have the human overlays verifying. But it does make a big difference what you're able to do. So Asher, we had a question come in from David. Do you work with clients to load prior history from the previous GL they had? And is there one major GL you see people coming from when they're moving to AgilLink?
Yeah, good question. So in terms of the GL people are coming from, I see a lot of people who are coming from a QuickBooks environment where they've outgrown QuickBooks, whether it's security and controls, whether it's just not meeting their needs anymore in terms of scale. That's where I see a lot of our customers coming from to begin with. In terms of previous history, the truth is many of our clients start with a fresh trial balance from the previous year. And the reason they do that is they're making so many changes in terms of the structure of their chart of accounts, how it's going to be organized, that bringing over old data can actually be challenging and somewhat detrimental. And this took a long time for many of our clients. Even on our legacy platform, we did not bring over all their old data. You imagine someone's on a platform for 10, 15, 20 years, it decays over time naturally. And to bring that decay over into a new implementation, you're taking that debt with you. So clients look at this as an opportunity for a fresh start. And the further away you get from your starting point, the less and less important some of that historical information is. I found what Alex said very interesting, and I was kind of thinking through the nature of your historical data. But I think it's a little bit different with the general ledger, where you're not just taking, documents and pure transactions, but you're taking structures of GLs and how things are coded and how they roll up, et cetera, and trying to fit that into a new system. Most times customers find that a fresh start is actually the way to go. And customers, as daunting as it might seem at first, they actually end up enjoying that process because it gives them the opportunity to redesign their chart and to rethink how they structure their general ledger.
Yeah, it's actually a great point, Asher. And in some sense, maybe the corollary for us would be that I think oftentimes some of our customers will actually try to rebuild from scratch their historical positions in Adapar or in Orion or in other places using the historical backfill that we do, using the kind of raw source document, right? And so I think there's actually some similarity there, notwithstanding it's a very different use case, of course, and it makes sense why you guys don't do that.
Yeah, we have used to use a lot of QuickBooks, and anytime we can transition to a clean set, it is just so refreshing to not have to carry what very often you don't realize it until it's not there. You don't realize the burden, the elephant that you're literally dragging behind you in those old charts of accounts and categories and departments and classes and all the things. It truly, when you can make a clean start and just store that historical, it's pretty nice to be able to do. So, okay. Is there anything else? I don't see any other questions coming in. So I'm going to wrap this up, give you each about a minute. Is there anything that we've not talked about today that you feel like is important to either reiterate or to make sure everybody knows before we start sliding down the slide to the holidays?
I would say just one observation I've had over the years is, as you evaluate different solutions, look at the technology. It's super important, but more importantly, look at the team behind the technology. I think that, technology comes and goes, and it will continue to do that. But you want to see the integrity of the team, the longevity of a team that's behind it, the expertise that a team has in understanding your business. And I'm sure I'm not saying anything new here, but it's something that I think, why have we been in business for 50 years? Right? That's a really long time to be doing business and technology. And I think beyond the market that we serve and how we build toward that market, it's the people behind that are running the business that really bring the value to our customer base. And you want to get a sense for that as you're evaluating technology. You could be wowed by the bells and whistles, and that's great. And there's amazing technologies out there, but really get a sense for the team that you're going to be engaging with and working with.
And you don't always need the bells and whistles. Alex, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think for us, maybe one thing I would add that's not always the most intuitive thing is that, I think we're taught in business that industries have switching costs, right, as a characteristic generally applied to industry. And I think something that we've done because of the approach that we've taken is we've created a bit of an asymmetric switching cost situation in our space. And so I think just to call that out, right, I think whether you're doing this work manually and drowning in it, or, you're using another provider and finding that it's not meeting some of your needs, I think switching to Bridge and onto Bridge is a bit easier than, the intuition or conventional wisdom would suggest as we think about how hard it is to typically implement solutions like this. So, encourage folks to just always take a look and get educated as to what's out there. And we always run kind of test runs at the beginning of any engagement so that folks can actually see that in action and see how quickly that time to value piece actually comes to fruition.
Awesome. Thank you both very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, Bill, Adriana, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, Christi, Asher, and Alex. Really, really good program. Christi, excellent moderation. Thank you very much, and for also picking up all the questions.